Welcome to the Monday, November 23rd, 2020 study session of the Littleton Planning Commission. There's no roll call tonight, so we'll get right to it. The study session topic tonight is ID number 20-292, McDonald Automotive PD, Amendment P4. Just a little prologue before we get started here. This is it's for the audience as well as planning commissioners and applicants and staff. This is not a formal quasi-judicial hearing on a plan development. This is an informal P4 presentation, P4 standing for Preliminary Project Plan Process. So it's P to the fourth power here. The order of the meeting will be staff will be giving a presentation, and then planning commissioners are invited to give their opinions, ask questions. The applicant, this is something new that we haven't done before in P4. The applicant now has a chance to give a short presentation of their project, and then again, planning commissioners can pepper the applicant with questions and comments. We encourage comments here. Normally, I ask planning commissioners to withhold, in formal hearings, ask planning commissioners to withhold their opinions to the end when we do summations. In this case, we're after opinions throughout the meeting, so please feel free. The public does not have an opportunity to speak during this P4 discussion. If an official application is subsequently made down the road, the public has a chance to send in written comments, as well as show up at the hearing and speak in front of the Planning Commission. Lastly, Planning Commission what we hear tonight. We are advisory to City Council. City Council will have the final say if this goes to a formal application. And then lastly, I was told that after we get done with our P4, the applicant will be making a P4 presentation to council as well. So with that said, we'll switch it over to staff for their presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Rudnicki and Planning Commission. This is for the P4 for the McDonald Automotive concept for an auto conditioning center at 1151 West Mineral Avenue. Presenting is Carl Onsager, myself. So tonight, I will present the P4 concept and the site context. The applicant will follow up with a presentation of their own for why they would like to move forward with this. And then Planning Commission will provide informal and non-binding input and feedback. And, both myself and the applicant are happy to field any questions. The address is commonly known at 1151 West Mineral Avenue. It's actually, upon a building permit or a formal application, we would readdress this property onto West Mineral Place. But if you were to kind of Google it, that's where the pin would drop at 1151. The existing permitted use is office park. This is a kind of a mismatch of a designation. So the Southbridge PD was approved originally in 1978. And in that tentative plan, and I shared a screenshot of that in the staff report, designated this area, which is sub-area K of the tentative plan, as office park. It did not include any other guidelines or things that you might see in a more modern PD. There have been some PD amendments in this area that have been able to flush that idea out, but otherwise things have been allowed to develop as office park, generally limited to office uses.
Excuse me, Carl. Yep. Sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your presentation on the screen?
I am not. Apologies, and thank you for catching that.
Sorry about the interruption, Carl.
No, not at all. It helps to no. Okay. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Apologies. So, so this is the vacant lot at the top northwest corner of West Mineral Place. Like I said, it's zoned plan development commercial, but the sub area designates this as office park. The proposed PD amendment is to permit an automotive reconditioning center and office on that vacant lot. And then the applicant had reached out for some neighborhood meetings, which is required prior to a formal application. They actually submitted a formal application and then withdrew that so they could move forward with this P4 process. But there has been initial neighborhood meetings and feedback, and I've included that in the staff report and documents for tonight's meeting. On the left is a snapshot from the site plan that was submitted and then subsequently withdrawn, so you can see kind of how this would be laid out. A full technical review would be handled at the time of a formal application, and on the right is some conceptual images that the applicant provided along with that application. Per the code, this would be required to have 20% unobstructed open space with a max height of 30 feet within 100 feet of the residential zone. And then additional kind of feet requirements would be called out in that PD. And then there's a minimum of a 50-foot wide open space buffer adjacent to that residential zone. The PD application intents per the code is to encourage more creative and effective uses, encourage innovative development, provide process as it relates to a particular site, and nature and intensity to be supported by infrastructure to minimize impacts on adjacent existing and future development. And so those are some of those details that frames the context of a PD amendment moving forward, but also would be reviewed against a formal application. Other criteria that staff would look at first and foremost is the comprehensive plan and how this fits in with the future land use and character map. So this area is called out in the future land use map as suburban commercial. And this may exclude some auto-oriented uses. And this is kind of paraphrasing from the description in that comp plan. The permitted scale and intensity of non-residential uses should be limited to ensure compatibility, especially when along a sensitive edge or adjacent to residential. And then looking at other select policies and goals out of land use and character, housing and neighborhoods, transportation, and environment, just making sure that the site is a fit with those designations in the comprehensive plan. We've also performed a preliminary economic analysis using the city's fiscal analysis tool, and both the use as solely office, which is permitted in that tentative PD plan, as well as the reconditioning center would be a positive impact from a fiscal economic analysis. So the recommendation from staff, happy to answer any questions, but we recommend to listen to the presentations, ask questions, and those can be difficult questions, identify issues and concerns openly, and then give a non-binding indication of support or conditions where the concept could be supported, just so the applicant and staff both walk away with a better understanding of next steps in this process.
Okay. Thank you. If you could put the faces up on the screen again. There we go. Thank you. Questions for staff. anyone can start, or I can go down the line, whatever you want. Well, we'll go down the line. Bruce, any questions?
Yeah.
Or comments too? Remember, get your comments in.
Sure, yeah. Carl or Mike, the presentation called for a minimum 50-foot open space buffer adjacent to residential zone. But the applicant's material, and I was trying to go back and find it. So in the applicant's material, they talk about a 27-foot buffer. Which is it, I guess, is the question. Is it 50 or is it 27? What are we talking about here in terms of buffering to the residents north of the property?
Absolutely. So the code requirement is actually a 50-foot buffer. And I believe that was indicated on the plan. So I can pull up a better image, but I believe it was 50 feet when doing a preliminary review of that site development plan that came in.
Okay.
But they would have to meet that requirement.
All right. I guess an observation. Well, okay. So I guess then maybe ultimately we'll ask the applicant as well. What are their expectations? Are they okay with the 50-foot buffer versus what I read was 27? So nonetheless, I think there are some issues we need to talk about, and we'll get into it, but I wanted to make the observation that the fact that this was essentially oriented towards office space, I think that what we're talking about here in terms of this reconditioning or prep center makes a lot of sense in a post-COVID world, because it's not like we don't have an oversupply of office space. And to my way of thinking, the likelihood of somebody wanting to take this parcel and build office space in this location, I think is highly unlikely given all the existing office space in the metro area that may or may not be used the way it was prior to March. So that's all I've got for the moment. I've got some other thoughts, which I'm sure we'll get into after the applicant presents.
Thank you. Bezok?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for the staff. When you look at the bigger zoning map, you will see there is PD sub C and PD sub I. And the way I understand, PD sub C in a zoning basically is a commercial, and PCI is industrial, which is include commercial and so forth. So it seems to me when I look at the PD that was approved many years ago, the wisdom was that PC sub C office was a buffer between that industrial, commercial on mineral and those residential, I think, Southbridge subdivision. So staff doesn't have any concern that by allowing this type of facilities, adverse impact on the residential, existing residential dwellings to the north.
So I think you're absolutely right. So PDC is generally, per the code, allows uses identified in the B1 and B2 zone. And so those range from, restaurants, office, medical facilities, and things like that. When you get into the B2 zone, B2 does start to allow for some auto-oriented uses, such as oil change facilities, auto repair, and those sort of things. So, the PDC is not entirely free of auto-oriented uses or even certain things that maybe have some impact, that would potentially impact a residential zone. in that there are some of those safeguards. For instance, the 50-foot buffer, certain height requirements and things like that. The PDI is, we actually do have two other auto reconditioning centers going into those PDI zones. So that's the South Park zone. From a city intent as these things, I would have to go back and really look at the timelines, to confirm that the PDC and office park designation in this area was intended as a buffer. That's certainly been the result, but given that this was approved in 1978 and then South Park was subsequently approved in 1983, I think I would have to go back and look and really dig into when these things came in. Was it kind of did council have some, broader scheme for this, or does this just happen to be how these two interacted? But staff would definitely look, there's guidance in the comp plan for compatibility, for looking at intensities and things like that. And, I think there's potentially some areas where, it would need to pass muster with the suburban commercial future land use character designation. And I don't know if we would really take a deep look at that, I would say.
And to just piggyback on that, the current, use that's described in the Southbridge area of this PDC is office park, without a whole lot of extra definition as to what that is. So adding automotive use, I think, as Stronsager was saying, we would take a look at what the impacts are to the surrounding neighborhood of anything other than office, and make some recommendations based on whether they're mitigating those impacts or not.
Well, the question that comes up is if that area was designated as office, as a buffer, and we have PDI across the street, what makes this site unique that we have to change the zoning and impact the residential land use that been there for longer than anything else? What make it unique? There's other lands available in the correct zoning. Why should we go through and change the zoning at this time?
That's probably a question for the applicant.
I would defer to the applicant as well.
Okay. That's it, Mark.
Oh, thank you. Craig?
Sure, yes. I have a number of questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the applicant on this. But first, a question for staff. It seems like we reviewed a proposal for this site a few years ago. Do you recall I remember looking at this site for something else.
It was a senior living.
Oh, okay.
Well, they ended up, that's the far northwestern part of Southbridge, right?
Right.
That is correct. Yeah,
and that's been built.
Stone Creek has now gone into that over off of Windermere and Mineral.
Okay. I can't remember us ever looking at this particular site. I'd never driven down Mineral Place, so it was new to me on Sunday.
Okay. So I guess my questions are, what is the relationship? I'd like to find out a little bit more of the relationship between the McDonald properties, the dealerships and the collision center, which is a couple blocks away, and how this facility would function within that, because I did see some concerns from the residents that there's a lot of shortcutting and traffic that's generated by this. And I guess my ultimate question is this really the right location for this facility? It certainly seems to be needed and seems to be a benefit to the city. But being adjacent to the residential properties, and I've gone through there too, and it's right, the residential properties are right there, right? The backyard is facing right out to it. There's certainly going to be an impact there, which I'd be concerned about. Is this the ideal location, or are there other areas within Littleton that might be a better fit for McDonald needs? In fact, there's that vacant property that's just to the south and west of this that fronts on Mineral that seems like it might be a better, certainly a bigger buffer to the residential and be right on Mineral. And then it just seems like, looking at the site plan, that you've really maximized the development potential of the site. There's a lot of pavement, a lot of parking. Do you really need that number of parking spaces? Could the number of parking spaces be reduced in favor of more of a campus feel, similar to the adjacent properties in that area? And I think the intent of the PD zoning that's there. So yeah, I guess, those observations and questions that I'd be interested in discussing with the applicant.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I guess I think Carl, you may have answered this, but the PDC, the current language doesn't speak about character, design, that sort of stuff, does it? Or is it quiet as far as what kind of character? I guess what I'm getting at is the character that we've just developed in the comp plan, the suburban commercial, and how it talks about, has a diagram of, open space and buildings are generally about the same, and then pavement is generally smaller. I'm wondering if there's language in the PD that speaks similarly to that, or not.
I could go back and look at probably the best place to determine some of that would be the old 1978 meeting minutes, when this was approved by City Council. To that extent, I don't recall seeing anything. And frankly, from the PD, I could bring that up on the screen and you can see just how kind of bare bones it is. It does not have any such, discussion. So I think rather than looking back at 1978, it's probably better to start looking forward to the comprehensive plan.
Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. That's really that's going to sort of inform. It's going to inform us, I believe, and the proposed character, land use character, not land use, but character was that suburban commercial, and I've got it pulled up on the screen, and it specifically says. Suburban character, commercial character is achieved through lesser coverage of the site with buildings and especially paved areas. And I don't know, I'm looking at that site plan and it's a lot of parking. It sounds like there's an excess of 557 spaces, which sort of speaks auto-oriented to me. I suppose if there was an innovative idea or some community benefit that, I don't know whether there's stormwater management for those 557 spaces that's sort of innovative, or if there's, how to mitigate heat island effect, or I guess that's maybe we can ask the applicant if they've got some ideas about, how to overcome those 557 extra spaces. And then just one other question, are tandem spaces typically counted towards or allowed to be counted towards your required parking?
So I think this is one of those situations where, it, I think, traverses the line between car storage and parking. And so when we see those, their parking requirement is, met generally based on the number of spaces provided for employees and, how many cars do we anticipate being there. But I think this one, and I'll let the applicant flesh that out. But on a number of these sites, we've seen, the desire for additional parking spaces and things like that as car storage. And so, if this was open to the public and your kind of typical drive up service center, then I think staff would not approve or look kindly on that parking configuration. But when it gets into really just car storage, it's an efficient way to get as many cars on there as possible, and with a known desire and need for a lot of these dealerships. But yeah, open to the public, no, but as a private use kind of parking of those cars and storing them, then yeah, I think we would allow that.
Okay. That's all I have, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Sherry?
I have a number of questions, but I think they're going to apply primarily to the applicant rather than staff. I just one I think I have for staff is on the south side of the property at the ingress point. See where the cul-de-sac is? There's another, I don't know the name of that street, but it goes west right in front of the property. And my first question was, would that ever go through that street? But then I see that it's not showing that on this project. I couldn't really tell if that would be a continuous right of way. You see what I'm talking about?
Is that the
I
street
do.
that has the dead end with a concrete culverts kind of blocking it?
There's nothing there. It's just field, just kind of tapers off.
I'll go ahead and share my screen and show.
There's a tree.
So I don't believe that there's any real intent to connect those at this time. A large reason for that particular is, I think, one, access to the facility right here, and then also those often act as fire access. So that's one of those things we've seen on other sites in this area, that the little road, but I don't believe that there is a plan to connect that for basically a frontage road or other internal circulation. So that'd be for this, really, to access this site only, as likely they're existing as a fire access.
Thank you.
Go back to the regular screen. Thanks, Carl. David? Jason's up next.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo some of the concerns expressed about, compatibility and in terms of conforming with the comp plan, the new comp plan, and whether this truly fits in with the suburban commercial designation. And if this does turn into a formal application, I'd just really appreciate a thorough analysis by staff on how the proposal does or does not match up with the comprehensive plan. That's it.
Okay. David?
I think my staff questions have been answered. I have some questions for the applicant. I will say that I think the parking just seems really high, and I'm not sure. I'm trying to reconcile the site plan with the renderings, and I know it's obviously preliminary and maybe not accurate, but I mean the site plan seems to have a lot of buffer between the residential and the site, but looking at the pictures, I'm just concerned about the buffering, that it's not going to be adequate. And I'm concerned about the traffic flow and the storage of so many cars. I mean, this ratio is 17, if I'm calculating right, 17 cars per 1,000 square feet of building space, which is more than 3 times the normal for like an office building. The building itself looks all right, but I'm concerned about that, and whether the trend of adding canopies to parking, if the applicant's going to come back for that at a later date as well, which seems prudent for car storage like this, but I'm concerned about this site, becoming an eyesore because of that. I mean, it is set back for mineral, but there's really not that much of a buffer between the residential, and if this goes to an application, I see a lot of people showing up. Similar to the time we had that senior living facility over by Broadway in Mineral, where all the adjacent neighbors complained about the site view. Even though this is a little bit less, I think the topography is more flat here, if I'm correct.
Yes.
So it'll be a little easier to hide, and there really isn't a view to the south for those residents anyway. But I'm concerned about the lighting, times the cars will be moving, things like that. So I'll just stop there for now.
And I think just to for traffic circulation, this would be reviewed with a full traffic study for the site. As a private conditioning center actually offers maybe a little bit of relief given that it's on a dead end of a cul-de-sac, and this is just one of those situations where if this was actually a full repair shop open to the public, or even office, might be a little bit less positive for a traffic report, just because you're dealing with peak hours, and this one may be limited employees, or they could stagger times or things like that. But hours of operation would be something we'd probably also look at, and lighting for sure with a formal site development plan.
Is that it, David? Okay. Just a few things. Were there any resident responses to the applicant changes that were in the plans that were made after the neighborhood meetings, or are those the letters we've gotten so far?
So those are the letters that we've gotten so far from the applicant. So at this time, staff was not at those meetings. And so those are the, summations.
Okay.
And, from the applicant, and then a subsequent meeting would be required after first review comments as well. Another neighborhood meeting to see, how things were, basically, were any of those comments folded in. But that's a great question for the applicant.
Okay. I want to go over the parking requirements. They're proposing a 31,300 square foot building. For an office building, it's one space per 300 square feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that would put it at 104 parking spaces required for a building of that size. If you doubled it, if it were just an office building, you've doubled it. There's plenty of room on the site to do so. You'd have 208 parking spaces. This site has 695 parking spaces, which obviously turns this. It's more than a conditioning center. It's a warehouse for cars that are delivered, come in, and then don't go to the conditioning center. They're parked there until they're brought over to the site of sale. And so we're not talking about a conditioning center. It's more so just by square footage, a warehouse of cars. So 695 versus 104 is 6.7 times the minimum parking for if this were just strictly an office use. So there's a concern of mine there. What is the height limit for this site outside the 150-foot buffer between the residential? What are they allowed to do height-wise if this were an office space?
So from that, I'm actually looking and brushing up on that. So I think the only height requirement that we have is a 30-foot max within that. And I'm actually pulling up the code in expectation of this question. And I am not seeing a maximum height for PDC other than that general requirement.
So just that 30 foot within a certain distance of the residential and then fire away, correct?
It appears to be that.
Okay. Okay. The only limit would be the, eventually if you've got 50 stories, you couldn't get the parking to work. So there's other limits and open space requirements. Let's see. Can you talk about the applicant talked about other PD amendments that were made in the Southbridge area? It was mentioned the assisted living. Were there any other PD amendments made over the years since what, 78 or whenever this was approved?
Absolutely. If I could share my screen again, I will walk you through those.
But just general, I don't need to go point by point.
Oh. So there was a PD amendment that allowed the cluster townhome apartments in this area. And then a number of the amendments were actually focused on the, this used to be the global something. It was for offices for overseas missionaries and mission trips, which kind of those amendments focused on, they needed some temporary sleeping quarters for people who were just in town to, visit. So they were allowed to make some modifications. That building is now being used as medical office space. So, but other than that, the other major amendment was the assisted living at the Stone Creek facility.
Okay.
So there were some amendments in this PD.
I was involved with both the assisted living and the World Center, whatever you call it, there on southeast corner or southwest corner. That's all my questions of staff. Is there any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll go to applicant presentation.
Looks like I'm waiting to be allowed to start the video, but just want to take a moment here while they're working through the IT components here, just to thank staff and thank Planning Commission for hearing us on this proposed development for the McDonald's Administration Reconditioning Facility. I will see if I can share my screen and at least start the presentation while we're waiting for our video to start. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so we would like to just go through a brief process, just going to get you back up to speed on what we've gone through so far to get to this point right now with the P4 process in front of you at the Planning Commission. So in late April, we did send out notifications to roughly 150 addresses within the 700-foot radius of this location, notifying them of our proposed project. Due to the pandemic, we provided a web link to a website that had some narrative, had site plan, had some renderings, a fly-through video, and probably more importantly, had an option or an ability for them to fill in comments and questions to us directly. We left that option to fill in those comments open for about a month and a half. In that time, we received about 56 independent views of the video and almost more than double that to the website itself, resulting in 17 comments, primarily from that forum on the website, but also we did receive a few via phone and email as well that was forwarded on to staff. We reviewed those comments, categorized them into a few main topic areas and provided a response both to a direct email and back to the website. From there, we took those comments, worked on our plan a little bit more, had a pre-app with the city, did a little bit more engineering onto the site, and then determined it was probably appropriate to have another neighborhood virtual meeting with those residences directly to the north of our property, so contiguous to our property location. From there, really our goal on that Zoom meeting was to get some feedback on what they would like to see in that buffer. From our understanding, the buffer that we had, the 26-foot buffer, so was based on the fact that that neighborhood to the north was part of the same overall general PD. However, we wanted to enhance that buffer, increase it to the 50-foot that you see on our current proposed plan, and then get some feedback from those neighborhoods from what kind of amenities and site features they would like on that particular buffer. From there, we started gathering our materials to provide a initial submittal to the city, and we're encouraged to go through the P4 process. And that basically brings us to where we are today, meeting with Planning Commission, and then next month with City Council. Now, with any kind of neighborhood meeting, there's things that need to be clarified, as well as some things that need to be addressed and resolved within your design. So when we looked at this, we really came up with 4 primary concern areas. First of all is the use of the building. And I think probably more importantly is what this building is not. So it is not a body shop. It is not a repair shop. This is really a reconditioning center with some administrative offices. So when you go to sell your car, buy a new car, and you trade in your car to a dealership, that used car needs to be reconditioned. It might need some paintless didn't repair, maybe the windows tinted, some clear masking, some fluid change, really some enhanced detailing, and finally a trip to their photo booth for support of their internet sales. So that's the primary function for this building. Looking at the noise and light, those are also major topic areas from the neighborhood. And again, this is not a body shop, so that noise that they're typically associated with a body shop is not present at this facility. Furthermore, all functions within this facility are inside that building, housed in a very dense mass masonry construction to help mitigate some of that noise. Now, there's no intercom or PA system to call techs out there. They all utilize tablets with a computer-based parking stall matrix to locate those actual cars that they might need for service to get some of those functions for the reconditioning. That way they will not be out there hitting those beepers like you may do when you go out to find your car at the mall parking lot. Looking at lighting as well, we'll be using fully shielded LED lights. And we're really pulling those into our parking areas only. So we are cutting off our light levels at the southern edge of that enhanced landscape buffer that we'll be able to show you here on the site plan in a second. Now, the overall lighting, just like any office park, would be a low level security, roughly less than 5-foot candles on average there. Now, looking at landscape, that was another big reason why we wanted to meet with those neighbors directly to the north to find out what kind of amenities, what would they like to see there, what kind of plants would they like to see. So we got some really good feedback from those neighbors on that Zoom call and incorporated that into this latest plan that you'll see. I think it was submitted into your packet and you'll see again tonight. Traffic was one of the last major components that the neighbors did bring up as an area of concern. As was mentioned in the staff comments, this probably does have a lesser burden on traffic than what could be a comparable office park. As a result, the traffic would be dispersed throughout the day and wouldn't be adding to the congestion at the peak AM or PM hours. Furthermore, this has no public or retail destination, so it's really only a service facility to help or offload some of the burden from the other McDonald's dealerships and facilities in Littleton. We'll take a little bit more look at the design here. So looking at the site plan here, just a few things I wanted to note and try to address some of the questions I saw here. And I don't know I'll address all of them, but we'll definitely circle back if need be to address more of your questions here. So the primary entrance is off of this main drive here. And this is a already recorded access easement down into this southern property here, as well as a Denver water easement across here. So this would be the primary access into the facility. It's a roughly 32,000 square foot footprint of the building with about 5,800 square foot second story located on this southern portion of the building. Again, we're trying to push that second story to create a little bit of a setback from those neighbors to the north. To further enhance and screen that visual from the neighbors, we have incorporated some living screen walls along this north edge of the facility, and then extended that as freestanding screen walls along this contiguous landscape islands flanking either side of the facility. In this enhanced landscape buffer that I mentioned before that we met with the neighbors to really hone in on what some of their requirements were, we've added a gravel pedestrian path across there with some seating areas, and then working with them to choose some of the particular landscape trees, shrubs that they would like to see. Again, that meets the City of Littleton's requirements for landscaping. From here, we also are meeting the 20% open space requirement, and our interior landscaping does exceed the 5% requirement, and we're at about 8% right now. The max height is 30% at our tallest section, and all of our HVAC is located on the lower roof sections of the 1-story building, fully shielded by their parapet from the residential view. We can flip through some of these renderings, but I believe you also had these incorporated into your packet, so we'll go pretty quickly through here. We'll start here on the southeast property corner and rotate our way more or less clockwise around the building. And again, these renderings, to address one of the questions, were done before our latest site plan revision. So some of the things like the trail, the increased buffer in the back aren't quite incorporated into this, these renderings here. But what you will see is our intent here to try to match our architectural aesthetic to what is commonly found on commercial office buildings around the area, with varying size, color, and texture masonry, as well as some ribbon strip glazing systems, architectural canopies, metal panels. And then when we recessed any openings into the building further and oriented them so they face away from the residential areas. Here's a snapshot of what that living screen wall will look like. And we did one of these at another dealership in Colorado, and it's been a pretty successful outcome so far. Again, this rendering from the residents' perspective, again, they're about 6 to 7 feet above the elevation of our parking lot at this area. But this rendering was done before our latest site plan iteration. So it does not show that enhanced landscape buffer with the trails and seating areas. But it does show our commitment from the get-go of trying to do what we can with landscape to screen the visual view of the parking lot from the residents. The next thing you want to touch on is, we understand that the design can be great, but at the same time, we need to make sure it fits in within the overall vision of Littleton through the PD amendment criteria, the comprehensive plan, and the South neighborhood plan here. So some of the things that were brought up as far as encouraging more creative and effective use of this land, we do feel that the use of this facility, its combination of both a office and an automotive reconditioning, falls within that PDC spectrum for sure. However, this general PD, just didn't have those kinds of tools to have a specific use outlined at that time. And it was just a general office use. We feel the office sector right now is in definitely some dire need and has some concerns going forward with this pandemic, how office life may move going forward. This is one opportunity that will continue to bring and make this place an employment center and provide additional tax revenue going forward. Looking at the comprehensive plan, we do feel it meets the suburban commercial design criteria. There are some language in there that indicates, when certain auto-oriented uses or increased paving may result, that needs to be offsetted by enhanced landscaping. And that was our primary driver for that additional buffer and really getting the input from the neighbors to the north on what they like to see for that enhanced landscape element. In addition, we're incorporating bioretention, rain gardens for our site drainage to provide some water quality before it actually enters into the storm system. Looking at the economy and tax base again, this is a project that will drive additional economic growth for this area and provide an economic and employment center with increased employees of varying skill levels. The last thing I wanted to kind of touch upon here, without going into each of these elements of the comprehensive plan, because it was outlined in that overall matrix that the planning staff provided in your packets, is really just touch on transportation a little bit here. The use of this facility, again, does not contribute towards the AM or PM peak times and would be dispersed throughout the day. So I feel compared to a comparable office building that could be upwards of 6 stories and quite a bit of occupants, that would be a massive amount of traffic coming and going from that facility on an AM and PM basis, where this is a much lower intensity use throughout the day. I think that's our quick presentation on this, but I think we'll also like to open up to more questions, and I think we would like to address some of your specific concerns that you had mentioned earlier as well.
Why don't you do that first before we ask new questions?
Okay, perfect. So one of the first things I just want to clarify is, talking about how the PDC does allow for this type of use as an office and automotive reconditioning facility. However, the general PD from 68, as I believe Carl had mentioned, really only states it as an office park, a very general description. So our feeling is that this meets the criteria for that PDC outline requirements. Looking at one of Bruce's comments about the 50-foot setback, we did make that adjustment, going from the original 27 to the 50-foot setback to address some of those concerns that the neighbors had, and again, with an enhanced landscape area to provide some of those amenities that they wanted to see.
I think Craig asked a question about the relationships to the other McDonald Automotive Group properties. This is not to replace the body shop. The McDonald's intends to keep their body shop in South Park. It's a complete different function. The McDonald's currently have a reconditioning facility off of Mineral and Broadway, just southwest of that intersection. That space was built within the last 5 years and is about 15,000 square feet. Obviously, the McDonald's are an anchor in the Littleton community, and their businesses continue to thrive. So this is a need and an investment they'd like to put in the Littleton community. Obviously, to have dealerships on Broadway, this will help support that. Used cars it is an evolving market. As they get used cars in, what they need to do is recondition them. The majority of their used cars are received via trade-in on their Broadway property. So what they need to do is move them over to this reconditioning facility, get them reconditioned so they can put them back on the lot on Broadway and sell the used vehicles there as well. Question about parking. There will be some new excess inventory stored on this site. It will probably be less than 50%. Dan had some comments about heat island effect. We've tried to enhance the landscaping, the interior landscaping. We've tried to break up quite a bit of these masses of asphalt with the enhanced landscaping in the parking areas, and then also using a vertical element of these living screen walls. Sherry mentioned the shared access easement. We do not believe the intent is to have this drive go through at any time to the west. This is, as we understand it, a shared access easement for this lot and the office building to the south.
I've got to jump in here and ask you a question.
Sure.
You talked about the excess inventory being parked here. Then you talked something about 50%. What was that in reference to? The lot would be 50% occupied by cars at any one time, or what's that percent?
Obviously, the McDonald's are planning for the future. As an automotive group, they want to maximize parking, but do it tastefully. So there will be some new inventory, excess inventory, Audis, Volkswagens, Hyundais, new vehicles stored here temporarily and backfill the inventory of the dealerships on Broadway. So this is not going to be all used cars.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead and continue.
I think David talked about lighting and the time of these cars moving. Lighting, it will all be shielded. There'll be zero light trespass. We've set the lot lights interior of the perimeter of the site, including that 50-foot buffer. We have done a traffic letter. We are planning that 30 vehicles per day will be shuttled to and from this site. They're not at peak at peak traffic hours. The McDonald's typically get the dealership opened, everything logged in, and then the traffic would come, inventory would come to and away from this site between 9 and 3 o'clock. Mark talked about the parking requirements. I think we can dive a little deeper into that of if this were an office building with the lack of height restriction, how many vehicles potentially could be parked on the site. Those in an office setting, those cars are going to come and leave during peak traffic hours, and also most of them would leave at least one other time throughout the middle of the day. Height limit, I think Carl answered that, that there is a limit within a distance of the residential, but on the south end, there's no height restriction. What did I miss? Anything?
How about the PDI buffer from the PDI across the street?
Yeah, I think looking at the comment as well about the PDI and the buffer across the street, I think those were separate plan development processes. And so I don't think that when this one was developed, that was really a consideration. Again, this is my thinking, but we'll definitely look on to Carl's insight when he does have any additional comments from the staff report of that. But it did seem like the South Bridge did precede the South Park PD.
And I think there was a little discussion about initially we thought there was a 27-foot setback at the neighborhood area. Our understanding is the setback, because the residential area was part of this PD, it was a 27-foot setback required. If it was outside of the PD, a residential development, we would have to honor a 50-foot setback. But I believe this PD, as it's in place today, only requires a 25-foot or a 27-foot setback. It was our intent to meet with the neighbors, and they pushed for the 50-foot. So that's how we got there. That may be, there's maybe some ambiguity in interpreting the PD.
Is that your presentation?
Are there any other clarifications we could possibly provide for you, or additional questions if we didn't specifically answer your questions?
Yeah, we'll have questions. Carl, can you just clarify the setback, the mentioned 27, ambiguity, 50-foot? What I thought you mentioned in the beginning that the 50-foot was a city requirement. Am I correct?
I believe that is staff's understanding at this time, is that because it is adjacent to a residential use and that PD is silent on the, it didn't try and modify that in any way, that is the 50-foot requirement is a code requirement. Okay. For that unobstructed open space buffer.
Okay. Is that a citywide code requirement or specific to this site?
That would apply to all PDC zones that are adjacent to a residential use.
Okay. All right. If you could go back to the our regular screen there with faces. And we'll go down the same line we did last time, so I can keep track here. Bruce, go ahead and start.
Start video.
Okay. Thank you. Good presentations, staff and applicant. Appreciate all the information. Couple follow-on questions to the applicant. what's your expectation with regard to canopies over the vehicles or hail tents? Is the renderings obviously don't show any such elements, but are you intending from an insurance perspective to put canopies out there to protect the vehicles, which again would have additional issues supposedly or potentially for the neighbors?
At this time and for the foreseeable future, the McDonald's do not plan on putting any hail structures in place. We develop sites for multiple auto dealers in Littleton, and we've been involved in the hail tent process. The McDonald's are a family-owned organization, and their relationships with insurance companies are much different than the Auto Nation type. The McDonald's don't see any value in the hail tents. I will bring it to your attention, though, that a few of the neighbors had a positive reaction to the hail tents, and that told us that they may, in fact, prefer hail tents in the future. That was prior to giving them some visuals of this buffer.
Okay.
But the McDonald's do not intend on putting hail structures on any of their property for the foreseeable future.
Okay. I didn't see anything in here, but I'll ask the question is, it would seem that the orientation of the structure, given the location, would potentially benefit from a solar energy configuration. Have you talked or thought about putting solar on this structure from a power perspective?
That's something we can consider and analyze if we move forward. If that's something the city would like to see, we're willing to look into that.
It'd be great if there were solar hail canopies.
There are solar hail canopies that have evolved to a point where they do make sense. But once again, we're back to hail canopies. They are horribly reflective, I will tell you that.
Are they affordable?
And just so we're all hearing the same number, given the combination of used vehicles and new vehicles, at any given point in time, at an average, I don't know, pick a time period, month, week, how many cars in some sort of a range would it be likely to be parked on this particular property?
I think the expectation should be 600 vehicles.
Okay. All right. So whether with a mix of used and new and so forth and so on, obviously it probably, to state the obvious, I'm kind of assuming you guys would prefer to not park your inventory over here extensively versus have it on Broadway where people might actually buy it.
Absolutely.
All right. Couple just observations. Looking at the comprehensive plan, the suburban commercial section on page 28 that staff referenced, there's under characteristics, the fourth bullet down says near residential properties and areas, permitted scale intensity, the non-residential uses should be limited to ensure compatibility, including adequate buffering, screening criteria for placement and orientation of buildings and parking areas, height limits, and residential and appearance architecture standards. I don't know about the last one, but I think you've done a credible job on the other components there. And then to take it a step further, I looked at corridor mixed use, in as much as this is a corridor, on page 35 of the comprehensive plan, and there's a reference in there that states where a site's immediate vicinity has a greener suburban character, site design and development criteria can minimize auto-oriented development outcomes. such as site coverage limits, more intensive landscaping and buffering, etc. I might suggest maybe additional trees and landscaping within the parking area could assist in that regard. But I think for the most part, you folks have done a credible job of designing this, and it is what it is. As I said initially, I think the idea of putting up a 5-story office building on this parcel is a non sequitur, because in this day and age, I can't imagine why anybody would want to risk that kind of capital. But what you're doing, there is a use for it. There's a need for it. The McDonald's have been good corporate citizens for a long time, and we're pleased as a community to have them in Littleton. And I think it's a good project. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
I think one other thing that we didn't mention, or that should be reinforced, obviously the McDonald family has had huge involvement in this development and wants to be respectful of the Littleton citizens because they are the McDonald's customers. We've pushed this site to the south as far as we can operationally. If you look at the openings and the doors, they are all facing away from the neighbors. Everything's to the south. We've inset everything to give it the office park feel architecturally. There's a mix of materials on here, and the only overhead doors that are near the residential area are screened with that large screen wall, that living screen wall.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that is the quietest part of the operation. A vehicle rolls out of there from photo.
Thank you.
Okay, Bezod?
I have a series of questions, and I had one question that I asked the staff, and they wanted to refer to you. I said, what make this site unique for your operation that the other site on Mineral, the vacant lots, does not provide the similar setting for you?
I'm going to defer this to Patrick Hutchison. I don't know if you're aware, but Michael McDonald of the McDonald Auto Group is here, and Patrick Hutchison, CFO for McDonald, is here. Patrick can talk about the real estate selection, this piece versus the alternative piece directly on Mineral.
Andy, I don't remember exactly why that location wasn't available. I know we tried to get a hold of the owner of it and see if they'd be interested in selling it to us. But for whatever reason, I don't remember the exact details, but they were not interested in selling it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
This site has had a lot of opportunity in the past. A developer's never been able to make it successful. I think with COVID, there is no office developer out there looking at this site potentially. In a good market, this site would not work for office. We understand that's what its original plan is, but in order for this site to develop, somebody's going to have to get creative. I think in the past, the McDonald's as developers have been very creative. You look at the corner of Broadway and Panama and the assemblage they put in there. They're very good and responsible developers. That's what they intend to do here.
Okay, the other question I had, what's the hours of operation for your facility?
So hours of operation, Monday through Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 4, and Saturdays they work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We anticipate having 30 employees on site when the facility opens.
Okay.
That will be a growth in jobs from the existing facility. The existing facility's 50% the size of this one.
So after 5 o'clock, there shouldn't be any light or anything. There shouldn't be any noise. And 6 o'clock in the morning, there is nobody there, no vehicle, no noise, no nothing. Is
Nothing.
that correct? Okay.
That's correct. The neighbors, when we had our more intimate neighborhood meeting with the adjacent neighbors, were concerned about noise and hours of the day. their biggest concern was heavy traffic around the medical facility that's just to the east. One of the challenges is there's medical waste haul-off trucks that are in and out of there at early hours. The McDonald's will not have this facility opened prior to the times that we've listed, 7:30.
Good. I like that. The other question that I had, how many vehicle haulers you're going to bring to this location per week?
So currently, we're projecting 10 per week. So that's about 4 trips per day. So two transports, and this is an optimum to fill all of these parking spots. You would have a transport come in and out twice, so a total of 4 trips per day.
And does your design allow for the turning radiuses for those kind of transport?
Yes.
They are not going to park in any streets or on any driveway, correct?
No, and if you'd like me to bring it back to the site plan and screen share, we can show you how we intend to maneuver those trucks throughout the site.
Please do.
I like to see a reserved spot for those haulers. I had an office building next to Mercedes of Littleton, and that was one of the biggest issue. We called the police probably every day for months to solve that problem. So,
all right, so if you see where the red dot is, we're going to pull a transport in here, continue to the left, and we've actually screened with landscaping where that transport's going to stop. So it's going to pull a little bit further to the left than that red cursor. It will stop. We will unload and load interior of our site. Once we're done manipulating the small cars onto the large transport, it will go around the perimeter of the site. We will also utilize this as our fire lane. It will exit out onto Mineral, and this heavy truck traffic will head westbound on Mineral to Santa Fe. And then it'll either head north or south on Santa Fe.
Now, that Mineral place is not designed for that kind of heavy traffic. Have you looked at the pavement section, and are you guys willing to upgrade the pavement section in that area?
We have not looked at the pavement section, but if that's required, obviously that's a critical portion of this development.
Okay. So you said that total number of employees going to be 72, I believe. Is that correct?
Currently, it's 30. The day
30.
the facility opens would be 30 employees.
Okay. Let me look at my notes. Your LED lighting, are those going to have 2 intensities, one during the working hours and then kind of dim out during the non-working hours?
Now it's going to be a low light level constantly. This is not inventory for show. It's stumble lighting, minimum security level. It is not our goal to show these cars at all. If you look at our working hours at 5 o'clock, at 5:01, nobody's going to be out there looking for a car.
And your stormwater management, you don't show any retention pond, detention pond. What do you want to do with those?
The whole area where you see the red cursor.
That's
all stormwater treatment.
Okay.
Higher retention, rain garden through there.
Okay. I think that was all my question, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Craig, you're up.
Hello, yes, thanks for the presentation. I did have a few questions here. One is, I understand that the trail was put in there as a request from the neighborhood, but I'm just wondering, it seems to be sort of a dead end. How do you get there? Where does it go?
Our goal is not for this to be a public park. There's not access to the east or west to this pocket park, if you will, for the neighbors. This is simply for the adjacent neighbors as a quasi extension to their backyard and a buffer that the McDonald family has offered for them to enjoy. I think we talked about having public access to it. After our more intimate neighborhood meeting with the contiguous neighbors and long discussion, they thought they would prefer not to have a lot of people back there for safety concerns. It's not an easily patrolled area.
Understood. So that, but they can access it from their backyards?
They would access it from their backyards via a gate. One of the neighbors does not have a fence, so visually there's no barrier.
Okay, thanks. Second, I love the screen walls, the green, living green walls. They're on the north side of the building, and it sounds like you've done this before. McDonald's done this before. There's a lot of challenges associated with maintaining, growing and maintaining something like that in Colorado. I just wanted to alert you to that fact. North side actually works better for certain types of vines, but you don't get much sunlight there, so it's very limited palette.
Sure. McDonald's has had an ongoing contract with Designs by Sundown for probably the last 15 plus years. They pride themselves in their landscaping. If you look at their campuses on Broadway, it's probably some of the nicest landscaping out there. Design by Sundown will continue to maintain all of this, and our expectation is for it to look just like any other McDonald family facility.
Okay. Could you just, I think there was something in the proposed agreement about the routing plan between facilities. I was kind of sensitive to some of the residents' concerns about traffic and speeding in the area, and the fact that folks use Jameson and Eladi as a shortcut. How do you envision that working in terms of?
I think one of the benefits of going through this neighborhood process is we get to hear from parts of the community that we don't typically hear from. This is the first the McDonald Automotive Group had heard about speeding down Jameson. The McDonald has addressed that company wide. With this project, we will develop a traffic plan on how every employee will come and leave this facility. As you exit Mineral Place to the south, that is a full access intersection. The employee will go left, which would be east on Mineral to Broadway, and then a left on Broadway north to the dealership. It would be the opposite coming from the dealership here. Michael McDonald's passionate about not having his employees speed through any neighborhood. He does feel that all of his employees are an extension of his values and personality. So he has spoke with his employees about not using Jameson as a shortcut. This is the first we heard of it.
Okay, thank you. And this is my last, it's kind of a compilation of a couple thoughts associated with my first comments that, it just feels like you've maximized the site with pavement and, thinking of innovation and thinking of sort of creative use of this for the purpose that you're proposing and could be appropriate. I'd urge you to consider some things. One is I was out bicycling yesterday out by Lucent and the Highline Canal Trail, and I noticed that the car dealerships there along C470 at a certain time of the day, the reflection off all the windshields was almost blinding. There was talking about reflectivity of solar panels. The reflectivity of windshields is also pretty intense. So you have a little bit of a concern about that. But along those lines, with this amount of parking in this sort of campus type of environment and this suburban commercial type of land use, would you consider doing a 2-story parking structure that would, obviously the cost is quite a bit more significant, but it might serve several purposes. One is to reduce that sea of pavement, allowing you to have more of a green space buffer all the way around. Also, it would allow you to park the newer cars and the lower level where they'd be protected from the weather. And it seems like it might solve a number of issues. in terms of buffer and so on. I do agree with Bruce's prior comment that feels like it could use some more trees in order to get some more trees. And in order to have them grow to a mature canopy size, you may need to have some larger islands. And, you know, I think there's some opportunities here to perhaps lose some of the surface parking and still maintain the same number of total parking that you're looking for here.
Sure, I think a parking structure operationally and with the neighbors would bring some challenges that make this site no longer viable. But I think enhancing some of the landscaping and adding some additional trees is something that the McDonald's would consider without a doubt.
Okay, that's all I have, Mark.
Okay, could you bring up the faces again? And you can go back to the plan if asked to. Dan, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. You answered several questions, and I guess maybe one thing I just wanted to clarify. So all the various dealerships, the McDonald's suite of dealerships, any used cars basically will come to this location. Is that the thought?
So there's a number of ways that the McDonald's ends up with a used car. If a client comes in to buy an Audi and they trade in their used car, that's one means. Another means is you buy cars from an auction. Those may be ready to sell and hit the lot. Others are sold as a trade receive and may need some reconditioning prior to being put up for retail sale on the McDonald's lot. So that's the traditional three ways in which they were received. Most likely they will end up on this lot.
And I mean, what is the advantages of having, you know, the 600 cars right there? Is there a, you know, I don't know if there's an opportunity to, I guess what I'm getting at is, I mean, I think at least my comment and maybe a couple other people's comments, is just the amount of pavement. And so just trying to pick away at that and understand like what's the advantage of having 600 cars? Have you looked at parking somewhere off site and shuttling cars here, or what? Does it make you that much more efficient? I guess I'm just trying to understand more about that.
Currently, the McDonald Auto Group has some excess inventory at the collision center. They have a lot behind it that is strictly new car inventory storage. They're landlocked on Broadway. There is no more room to recondition cars on Broadway or store cars on Broadway. And we've run into the same problem at our current reconditioning center. So having a facility this size with this much parking is integral to the success of the dealerships on Broadway. There are a Volkswagen dealership, a Hyundai, a Volvo, an Audi, a new Mazda. So we have maxed out the real estate on Broadway that's available. And if there was any real estate closer to this, closer to the Broadway campus, I can assure you we've already looked at it and investigated it.
Dan, if I may, this is Michael McDonald. We've been trying to solve this problem for 4 or 5 years. And, if you go to our body shop, it is a really difficult place to do business for our body shop customers, but it's also bad for the city because all the transports go there to drop off the new cars. Because we're so landlocked, there's so much congestion that the semis can't turn around. So we constantly have a problem of the truckers dropping cars off on the street. So 2 things, this will free up having the new cars off that property in a very efficient time period so that we can actually have more space to receive the semis at the body shop. But the other thing is economic. We would prefer to have more used car spaces at the Broadway location, actual cars that have been reconditioned, photographed, and available for sale. Used cars has grown in the new car business. If you go back 5 years ago, we probably sold 250 used cars. Today, we sell about 450 used cars. And space is a big part of why we can't grow more used cars at the locations on South Broadway. So it's all about turn. It's all about efficiency. But if we can have more space of new cars at this location, it frees up spots at our Broadway location for used cars, so we can sell hopefully a good metric in the industry is to sell 1.25 to 1.5 used cars new. And because of limitations, we're currently, and it's also staff and economics, but currently we're about a 0.9 to 1 ratio. So we're trying to solve, we're not trying to solve, we're trying to grow our used car business to be at a better metric, which of course is good for all of us.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry.
I want to say, first of all, I think you have done a good job on your presentation, and it's nice to hear from the applicant direct to answer a question, so I appreciate that. And most of my questions, a lot of them got taken by Craig and Dan, but I have a few still yet. I'm concerned about the amount of parking and wondering if that's something that can be looked at. I know you just talked about the economics of needing all the storage, but that's just a lot of asphalt. I'm wondering too, is there an alternative to your typical asphalt paving that might not be as impactful as asphalt is? I'm not sure, but just want to throw that out. Also, since you do oil changes and those types of things there, are there typically environmental impacts from fluids from cars that have to be mitigated, or how do you handle that along the way? Because there's oil, there's steering fluid, there's gasoline, there's all kinds of fluid.
One of the requirements is that we have a sand oil interceptor. So everything that leaves the facility in a floor drain or from the floor goes through a sand oil interceptor. It's the same technology that we've used at all of the dealerships on Broadway. So no negative environmental impact to the site.
And then I did read through all the comments that were there from the neighborhood and from the adjacent landowners, actually. And I too share their concerns about the noise and the trucks coming in and out. And I realized you did mention that they would only be in and out twice a day, so 4 trips, which leads me to the question then, are all the cars transported to the site via truck, or do you individually transport cars in and out of that site?
No, the majority of the vehicles will be driven over there by McDonald's employees. It will be vehicles that are purchased at a trade-in transaction when somebody's buying a new car.
So individual trips, there will be quite a few of those, it sounds like.
Correct. We're figuring 30 per day.
Vehicular trips.
The concerns about the speeding and racing through the neighborhood. I happen to live back in Southbridge. I don't live adjacent to this property, but I'm aware of some of the conditions in terms of traffic in the area and everywhere else. So the other thing, and then the noise and lighting we talked about, and I think a lot of the neighbors mentioned that quite often as well about their concerns. Let's see. The other comments, Craig mentioned the green space in the back, and I too saw that it was kind of a little pocket park, self-contained, and also wondered how that would really be usable for the neighborhood back there. But you mentioned there are gates, but when I walked that today, there really didn't seem to be any access there at all. Nor, it's not connected, which you said wasn't the plan. So not really a question, just kind of a comment. It's just kind of self-contained, and it doesn't do a whole lot for an overall amenity, I don't think. Let's see. Yeah.
Can I answer the question about?
Okay. Pardon me?
Well, I was our idea to actually create a path for the neighborhood and for the city of Littleton, and it was actually the neighbors that pushed back on that. They just really were concerned about safety, and hanging out there after hours. If you guys give us guidance differently than that, we'll of course listen to that. But it was really just to respect the neighbors' concern about they don't want a bunch of people they don't know in the back of their house. So that's why we designed it the way we did. But if you guys want to change that, we're open to any.
Initially, it looked like there was really no access to that area, but you mentioned that there would be a pathway or gate. So for those people or homes that abut to that, correct?
Correct. There is not a lot of pedestrian traffic down East Mineral Place. There's a couple concerns. The area is not going to be well lit. Our goal is not to have it well lit. So at night, that park area will be dark. So I think we will fence the east end, the west end, and then it would be up to the abutting neighbor should they want to put a gate in their existing fence to access the area, with the exception of the one neighbor that does not have a fence. But it's not a goal to draw pedestrian traffic to that area.
Okay, and my last just observation is, or comment is, I would really like to see the amount of parking reduced. Once again, it's just an awful lot of parking with over 600 cars parked there. And that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason?
All right, thank you. Could you talk a little bit about what the upper floor functions as? Is that office space, or is it just the windows are intended to let light into the lower areas of the building?
So it will be a combination. Most of it is employee amenities and administrative area. So there are managers in this facility. The McDonald's have made a commitment to their employees, so they have high-end break rooms, lunchroom, locker room area, showers, employee amenities to continue to retain the employees they've had. So that's about the extent of the office area.
Okay. Yeah, as one concern I did note, in some of the comments was about lighting, and just from past experience with even office users, upper stories that face neighborhoods can cause compatibility issues, and there may be an opportunity to make sure you've got either some sort of film that filters the lights at night from spilling towards the neighborhoods, or mandating some form of interior shades that have to come down at a certain time to ensure that you don't have that sort of spillover. Because I'd wager that the Littleton lighting code addresses outdoor lighting, but not necessarily the impact of interior lights. A lot of people covered some of the questions I had, sort of such as about turning radius. One thing that it looked like was happening in the renderings, the living screen wall is a really neat idea. The portion that was on the northwestern part of the building, screening, it's not a loading dock, it's the vehicle entry area, appeared like it didn't have an opaque backing. So in the wintertime, if the vines lose their leaves and you don't have as robust a coverage, there'd be a lot of visibility through there if there's not something opaque on the south edge of that living material. So it'd be something I hope you could consider. Some other folks have talked about, and I think this was reflected in some of the neighbor concerns, the urban heat island effect. One way to potentially address concerns about, the amount of imperviousness is to use a pervious pavement solution. Those are, more expensive than standard asphalt, but you can also use pavers that are light colored and a little less likely to absorb heat. And they have been used in pretty harsh climates. The Morton Arboretum near Naperville, Illinois, Chicago's known for nasty winters, uses pervious pavers throughout its parking areas. And they seem to be pretty successful with that. Got the questions about hours, hail tents. Someone else asked about the kind of the private park area for the neighbors. One thing I would advise is to design around those connections to make sure that you don't end up with trampled landscaping on the northern property line. And just thoughts about connectivity. Just looking at the office complex to the west, it appears there's fences that are along the western property line. So certainly other designs in this area have discouraged pedestrian cut-throughs along the southern property line of those residents. And I appreciate talking about your experiences with managing inventory, and having commuted southbound Broadway to eastbound Orchard, I can confirm that sometimes those trucks do utilize the street. Generally want to take that interior left turn lane when you're commuting in the morning rush. And it looks like from the aerials that your collision center is very heavily utilized. Not a lot of room on that site anymore. So you've certainly demonstrated a need. One just comment about I've heard some folks talking about parking and concerns about the amount of parking. I see that as vehicle storage. The purpose of this facility is to prep vehicles. Those vehicles need to be stored. It's less about transient parking, and just acknowledging that this is storage, and the more we can do to kind of mitigate the impacts of that constant presence of vehicles on nearby properties and neighbors, I think the better off we'll be. Thank you.
Jason, thank you very much for some of those comments. I think we can definitely incorporate a lot of those into our design. One thing I just wanted to point out is, as far as light overspill during night, because of the hours of operation, that would be very minimal. 5 o'clock would be a shut off time. So basically only in the winter time, for very few moments may you have any kind of light spilling outside from the building itself. But those other comments about the high albedo, the connectivity to the neighbors, opaque background of the vines, I think those are all definitely elements we incorporate into our design going forward. So thank you very much for your insight.
Excellent summation, Jason, as usual. Thank you. David?
The benefit of going late is that I can be brief. Most of the concerns that I had have been talked about, but I just want to echo again one of my main concerns that I think just about everyone has had here is that storage issue. I just think there's too many cars. I actually like the building. It looks nice. I like what you've attempted here with screening and buffering, but I just think there's too many cars. I guess I'll wait till to hear how many residents complain about the impact. I'm concerned about the trucks as well. 4 times a day coming through there, they're pretty loud. But mainly it's the number of cars that I'm just concerned about. I'm less concerned about the lighting after hearing your comments. This is basically a storage facility with a building on it, and just say what it is. And I think this is the wrong place for storage of cars. Like I said, the building is fine. The use to me seems fine. It's just too many cars. And, some of the ideas were kind of cutting back on a few of the spaces and adding more median space, more greenery, more blocking, basically. Maybe that would be fine. Especially towards the back where I'm just concerned about the neighbors. That to the front of the site, I'm not as concerned because you're surrounded by other uses, not industrial necessarily, but commercial uses. So you might expect to see cars, and they're probably in good shape, so that they don't look bad. As far as the just as an aside, the canopy idea, I like that idea just generally, but not for this site. I think that would make it more of an eyesore for the neighbors. So, that's my concern. And to me, my solution would be on the west side of the site, pushing the parking forward, or blocking it better, reducing the amount on that side so as to limit the impact to the neighbors. That's my main concern there. That's it.
If we may, let's dig into this vehicle count on site. That's something we've heard over and over in tonight's P4 presentation. If you can help us with the concern and understand that a little better, I think that will be helpful for all of us moving forward. The benefit of this amount of vehicles being on the site is they're not leaving and coming and going twice a day. We've actually done a little analysis of how many vehicles could be parked on the site should this be an office building development as it's planned. In that planned scenario, there is no control on the hours in which these vehicles can come and go to the site. In today's world with COVID, I can tell you none come and go from the site. But if you would like to see our analysis on potentially what this parking lot could look like, abiding by City of Littleton's requirements, we have a little analysis that we'd be happy to share with you if that's of any interest.
I think
At
that
the
might
same
come
time,
up
it's
when
helpful
you-
for us to understand if the concern of the parking is pure visual, is it traffic related, or is it just a desire to have increased landscaping on the site?
My concern about the parking is the visual aspect, the fact that it looks like a sea of cars, and it's directly related to the residents. I'm not really concerned about the other commercial uses. Typically people going to another office building aren't going to be concerned about seeing a bunch of cars, but just seeing the parking, it's just a sea of cars. And I have to say, you're right. It seems like kind of a trade-off to me. You've got a lot of cars stored there so they don't move in and out. I guess you're saying that you're going to store 50% of the cars on the site are going to be just stored there. So take those away, you've got half as much parking, and that's probably a lot better. And those cars that are stored there for the new cars that are stored there because you're not storing them on your lot. I wouldn't say it's disingenuous to say that because those cars are going to be coming and going anyway as you move them in and out. Are you going to only move the new cars by truck in and out of there? So you'll load them up on trucks on the way out 4 times a day? My concern really is just for the residents and the visual aspect of just seeing a sea of cars all the time. And I think there's going to be a lot more movement than you're saying, because a lot of those new cars are going to be moving in and out.
Well, I hope there's more movement than 30 times a day because, today we're hoping to sell cars. But, our options are we can go back to South Broadway and we can build, if you guys think parking structures are pretty, we can build parking structures on South Broadway.
Are you threatening me?
No. We get hail coverage from the parking structures, right?
Yeah, I mean, the parking structures on Broadway don't really concern me as much.
We still have the neighbors to the east that would not want to look at a parking structure, right? I mean, so it's which neighbors are we in? And we're fortunate that we have hail coverage from a national perspective because of our manufacturers have a great program. So that's why we don't have the hail tents. But if you take away a bunch of parking from this property, the economics don't work for us, and then we go back and focus on parking structure. So, is it neighbors to the east of the current store see parking structures, or do we have this site with a bunch of cars? And it's whichever one you guys prefer, but we have to solve the parking problem. As you know, our body shop can't receive that many new cars. We just don't have any space, and so we're very blessed to be in Littleton. We're blessed to be growing our company, but we have to solve a lack of storage, and all the land that we look at is going to have a building on it with storage. And so it's my understanding, and Junior, you can reinforce this, but it's my understanding that if you do have if you do have office space there, the office space would have the same privilege of having that many cars there, parking spots, based on the design of the
5 per thousand tops, 4 probably.
But if you have a tall building, I mean, I know our building wouldn't make that. I understand that. Somebody else builds an office complex, then they would have a similar amount of parking spots. So, we're trying to solve our problem within the designs and requirements of your city, right? And respectfully speaking, that we know we have to have a building on the property. We believe that we've worked with the neighbors to try to create a park-like feel for them and minimize the impact of seeing the sea of cars. But at the end of the day, we also are a business needs your support to continue to grow because of the fact of the matter is we do not have enough space for the new car volume that we have.
Yeah, you can say that, but if there were a 5-story office building on there, there still wouldn't be 7 rows of parking where if somebody were the first one in, they couldn't get out. You know what I mean? You've got 7 rows here that you're going to be parked in. No office building is going to have that much.
Yeah, well, and the reason why we did that was just to be able to build a buffer, the 50-foot buffer, and the other landscaping around the property. So we're just trying to maximize the space, just to be honest with you, so we can have better green on the neighbor side with the 50-foot.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me what I prefer, I would prefer parking structures along Broadway, or I would prefer underground, but that's more expensive. But Broadway is a much more heavily commercial street, and people are used to having heavy uses over there. Here, it's much more light, coverage, and it's just like I said, I'll wait till the residents come out en masse and complain about the number of cars on the site, and then it'll be too late to change.
David, I'm just going to add to your comment about the in and out flow. I think one thing that might not be as obvious to you is just our new car inventory level and the time frame that a car would be there. And just to kind of clarify that, so we do generally have somewhere around 75 to 100 days worth of inventory for us. So what does that mean? It means that cars could sit there for 3 months between landing there and then getting finding the right vehicle for the right customer. And so it's just a byproduct of the fact that we do carry so much inventory to make sure we have the car the customer wants when the customer wants it. And so it would not be an in and out day to day. It would be parked there, sit there, wait for the customer who wants that car, and then it'd be removed from the lot. So.
Yeah, and I understand you probably going forward, at least, I don't know, in the short term, if we have more pandemics, you're going to be doing a lot more online sales. And it seems like at least the company I work for has several dealerships, and all their inventory is online now. I could order, it's their company's in Minnesota, but I could order a car from here that's in Minnesota if I wanted to, because everything's online, even the used cars.
Well, our cars are all online. It's just that when you talk about the variables of a new car, you can have one model can have 30 different options, different interiors, different safety features, all that stuff. So it's all of our vehicles are online, and we sell cars online every single day. And we did very well back in April and May when we were online. But we still have to have the variations to make our customers happy. It's all about choice. We have one car that has the same options on it, right? Then we don't need the parking spots, but the consumers prefer choices and options. And so that's why the manufacturers build the vehicles and the variants they do. And that's why they require us to have so many vehicles on property.
Oh yeah. I guess I wasn't really concerned about that. I understand what you're saying. And I was just thinking about the fact that people wouldn't be coming to the site to look at those cars. They can see them online, or what you've got. You can tell them if they have those options and how long it'll take to get something that they're interested in.
Right.
So I guess that was more of an aside, but anyway, that's just my concern. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. My comment, there's a lot of comments and very few responses needed. Okay. It'd be nice to have a traffic light on Mineral Way when it hits Mineral, but I doubt if you'll ever get it. It's pretty tough taking that left-hand turn. Pleased that there's no garage doors on the north facade. That's nice. I do have a concern since I walk the site. You look up to see the houses on the bluff. You know, whatever looks like 8 to 10 feet high, and you have 2-story houses. Peering down on the parking lot, that is a concern, and peering down on a lighted parking lot. So it's a concern there. I think you could probably read us loud and clear and that we want less parking and more landscaping. Me in particular, it's a little counterintuitive. I could see the 50-foot buffer not being as important as you say it is. What's more important is having more islands and wider islands, especially on the west side where you have that massive parking area. You need to break that up. I could see you have 695 cars by my count. Get rid of 20 to 30 cars. I know it's kind of cavalier for me saying that, but if you get rid of that many cars, you can increase the landscaping and make that parking lot a lot more palatable. I do want to ask a question about the sales tax. Let me preface it by saying I assume that we are talking about increasing the sales tax is the repair work is done, the conditioning work is done in this facility. The sale then and the tax is collected at your regular facility, and that's where Littleton sees a benefit. Is that correct?
Well, the parts sales, I'm not sure, Patrick, that's probably a question for you. The parts that we install on the vehicles at the reconditioning center, where does that revenue go?
That would go to Littleton. That's where that and then the work done there. Yeah, it's really.
We all know that new car sales, the tax goes to the county where you purchase the vehicle. So but there's a little bit limited benefit to Littleton for new car sales unless a Littleton resident buys that vehicle. I have to balance. When I first saw this proposal and walked the site and looked at the drawing, my first, to borrow an acronym from texting, is OMG. Oh my God. I've softened my feeling about this, hearing all the comments tonight and applicant responses. So I have to balance what you're proposing with what you could do with an office building, 5-story or even higher. There's no height limit, which is pretty amazing, and the parking that would be required for a large office building. It doesn't come near what the 695 cars that you're proposing. So that is a concern. I think again, loud and clear, it's the parking. I've got no problem with the building. And having a reconditioning center there, the way you're going to do all your repairs inside and screen the noise from the neighbors. If you do come back with an official application, I think there needs to be stringent notations on prohibiting major car repair, paint center, exterior work on cars, etc. And it has to be enforceable. So it has to be on the revised PD application. More landscaping on the interior of the parking lots I talked about. And this is more than a reconditioning center. This is a warehouse storage of cars that come in and out, and there's quite a few cars. Strict hours of operation. I think that also needs to be on the PD amended application, and it has to be enforceable. More detailed analysis of the site lighting. If you make an official application, obviously we're going to be seeing some light diagrams and make sure that there's no spillage into the neighborhood. Question I have for you is looks like your land, the land you're going to purchase, is at the top of the berm, is that correct? Not at the bottom?
No, there's about a 6-foot grade difference between where our land is and the berm of where the residence is to the north.
You own the berm. Is the berm part of the actual hill?
Yes.
Is that part of the
Yes.
property?
That's part of the property. It'll be part of that 50-foot landscape buffer.
Okay. And it looks the way you got the landscaping designed, you're going to be putting the landscaping more towards the bottom of the hill. Is that correct?
I think there's a mix.
We will create some more undulation in that 50-foot setback area. We'll actually create some berms to give some elevation to those trees immediately.
Good, because obviously, a screening of the parking lot with landscaping takes time. Trees don't grow, 20, 30 feet a year. You're not going to be putting in 60-foot trees right off the bat. You can't afford it. So it's going to take a bit of time. Neighbors are going to be looking, peering down, as I say, on the parking lot. What else here? So if I were a homeowner, I would have concerns. As everybody else here, we all read the neighborhood letter. So there is concerns that that will drive this approval or not approval down the road. So I think heed what we're saying as far as adding more landscaping and breaking up the parking lot. That's all I have. Is there any other comments from commissioners?
Is this the first, this is definitely the first P4 since the comp plan has been adopted, right?
Yep.
So you guys are kind of running the traps on this. And I guess that was kind of my first comment. It's a squeaky clean comp plan, and it clearly shows it as suburban commercial. And then I'm just thinking of the public are going to go and could look at this and see that there's a diagram for suburban commercial, and it's showing, more of a balance of open space and buildings and less paving. So it's just, it's a little, it's a reach, I think, for compatibility. I don't disagree. I mean, the use is great. I mean, I understand the use and what you're trying to do. I just feel like we could get some public comment or backlash, like, oh my God, we just had this new comp plan and here we go. We're already starting not to follow it. So that's my concern.
I had another comment I wanted to make. If you ever travel the Norgren site in the northeast part of our city, part of the Norgren site is being used for vehicle storage. And it is allowed use because of the zoning. I think it's an industrial zoning of that parcel, but it's really quite inappropriate being surrounded on three sides by residential, single family, as well as apartment buildings. So the fear I have here is that same feel is now being introduced on a site with residential up on the hill peering down. Anything you can do to mitigate that problem, that peering down at the sea of parking, would be most helpful for you to get this approved when you go for an official application. Anybody? Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
I had noted, and then I think one of the applicants mentioned, maybe it was Mr. McDonald, but the utilization of Designs by Sundown, which of course is a Littleton business and a high quality landscape design architect group. So I just wanted to offer compliments for engaging them. I think that should be a comfort issue for us, that those folks know what they're doing and do high quality work. So I think the landscaping that's part and parcel of this whole thing will come out real well as a result.
Carl, could you come up on the screen? Hello, Carl.
There he is.
Okay, took a nap, eh? Carl and I talked before our meeting started, and he thought it might be good, and I'll leave it to commissioners if we're tired, or Carl asked me if if I could give a summation of items I've been jotting down, do we need to do that, Carl, or have we done enough?
I think it's been clear to me from the line of comments. If you feel that the applicant has what they need, I would defer I think also to Mike and Reed just to see what they feel on this as well. But
well, I'll summarize, if I may. I don't think anybody has mentioned problems with the building itself and the way it's laid out and the way the vehicles come in and how they're serviced inside. All of our comments are based on the outside. A lot of them with the parking, the berm, access, the 50-foot buffer, the Jameson being used as a shortcut. Please take care of that. Let's see, toxic chemicals an oil was a concern, but obviously you have to take care of that just by code. Found it interesting. A couple of mentions of a surface other than asphalt would be nice. I know it costs more. Let's see. Lighting was an issue. Solar came up on the building, that about sums it up. Anyone else? Seeing none, I want to thank the city's presentation. Well done, applicant. You did a great job. Appreciate your answering all the questions in a forthright manner. You are a good citizen of Littleton. And
excuse me, Mark. I think Mike wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Chairman. Just wanted to make sure you all knew what the next steps were in this process.
You stole it. I was just going to mention it. Go ahead.
Oh, gosh.
No,
okay. I jumped in too early. So they are scheduled to review this. City Council is scheduled to review this on December 8th. And that would be the City Council's study session where we talk about this P4. And then once that is completed, the applicant can make a formal application for a major site development plan or a PD amendment. Any platting work would be part of that as well.
Then it would come to us.
Let's see. So the PD amendment would definitely come to the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Yes. Okay. Again, we're advisory to council. Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll mention again that the public that doesn't speak during this study session will have a chance, if it's a formal application is made, to send in their written comments, which they can do at any time, but also join in at the meeting, the virtual meetings, and actually speak before the Planning Commission as well as City Council. So anything else? Then we are adjourned at 8:32. Thank you very much.
Thank you.